Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Hope Amplified. This is Sean Gaillard with Megan Lawson. Megan, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Well, I don't know about you, but I am absolutely soaring right now because we are with a great friend of ours, Lauren Kaufman, and just so pleased that the three of us, this is rare actually, when all three of us are kind of in the same space in real time, so to speak, and we're not texting or voice memoing or something, right?
It's so true. And it is such a treat to be with Lauren and with you today. And I knew when I was working on my schedule for today that I needed to set aside at least 2 hours because I know all of us. And I knew that we would want to at least be able to catch up for an hour before recording. And what do you have it? Like it looks like we've been talking for, and it just like nothing, like an hour just went by like it was nothing. And that's how you know that you're genuinely enjoying the company of others. So.
Megan, I actually did the same thing, so I know. Totally plotted it that way. So Lauren, I'm so sorry if you've only scheduled 30 minutes. We've just blown your schedule to hell. So
No, it is all good. I mean, thank you so much. When I got this invitation, I was, of course, honored because I love being in a space with both of you. It feels effortless all the time. Since day one, when we got into a space and collaborated together. So I too knew that it would take some time. So I did carve out some time for this conversation. So this, what everybody's seeing now is part two of the conversation because we had part one before, which is great. It's great to catch up with friends. And, it still is amazing that we have never met in person. But I feel extremely connected to both of you through, all of our collaboration, whether it be a podcast or we're a text thread or a blog post we're writing. It's just so awesome.
It's funny you mentioned that because I'm still laughing about us revealing our heights to each other so that we would be prepared when we do meet in person for the first time. And I'm just giggling thinking about all the other amazing people in this profession that we've all probably met online or feel like we know, but who we've never seen in person. And we might be surprised, like, oh, this person's taller than I thought, or this person is shorter than I thought, which is very much so what people will probably think when they meet me.
I have to say, I was surprised about both of your heights. I mean, Sean, I always knew you were tall, but Megan, I thought you were a little taller, but I embrace all of you, both of you, whatever,
yes.
short, tall, whatever it is. But, it's just, I don't know, that never came up after all these years.
No, it
How
hasn't.
tall are you?
And I think, like I said, I had a perception, Lauren, I think we share the perception that Megan is taller than we thought, or but that's not the case. Not that there's anything wrong with the height that you are at. So um,
Oh, thanks.
it'll be a great moment. We have manifested, I think, for our own hope amplification purposes that 2025 will be the year of some sort of permutation of us meeting up in person and gathering in real time and measuring each other's height and
Yes, let me make sure that you are telling the truth virtually.
yeah.
Bring the measuring tape.
Yeah.
So, but I love the theme of this podcast. And when I saw on social media that this is what was happening, I was extremely excited because I think hope is a topic that we don't think about intentionally all the time.
Mm.
Although I think that it's something that we live more often than we think. I think we live hopefully, you know? And I think hope amplified. I think it's much needed in the world right now because hope is really a function of struggle, I think. I think when we're struggling through something, that's when we need hope the most. So I think it's very much needed because especially, in the education world, which is the world we're all living in right now together in different roles in different states, it could be really hard. It could be emotional, it could be draining, but it's extremely gratifying. There are so many moments we live through, and the feelings are not linear, right? They're kind of up and down. But through it all, I think what remains constant is that hope that we bring to the work.
That's beautifully said. It
Really,
makes me curious. Sometimes I think when people share profound wisdom like that, there are stories that come to mind of what that's looked like in their work. And so I'm curious if a story comes to mind for you, that you'd be willing to share about, perseverance that you've seen in action, or because hope really is goals, pathways, and resilience. And so when you think about those three things, I'm curious of something that is playing out in your work currently, or that has played out, that has led you to be so wise about the role that hope is playing.
Yeah, I think, we were talking about earlier, this feeling of disappointment, because when I think of challenges that I've faced, even both personally and professionally, I can't think of one specific thing that's on the top of the list, but what I can notice a trend or a pattern in is that feeling of disappointment that's very, very hard for me to overcome. And I know I'm not alone in that sentiment, because when I do have these conversations with people close to me, they go, "Oh, yeah, I agree." And once I name that feeling,
mhm.
they say, wow, that is a really hard feeling to overcome. When you're a kid, it's hard to overcome when you don't get what you want. Maybe as kids, we're a little bit more egocentric. We're thinking of ourselves and you don't get what you want. You start experiencing that feeling of disappointment. And then as you navigate your life and you go through your journeys and your path, and there are disruptors on that path that happen, and you experience different levels of disappointment, whether it be from people, from events, just from different things that happen. How do we overcome that? And that's a lot of times through hope, right? It can really get you through that feeling. And usually we need hope during those uncomfortable times, or through adversity, or through that discomfort. Um, because disappointment is really expectations that are unmet, right? So how do we adjust our expectations through that and then have hope come in? Like, I hope I can adjust my expectations for this, because my natural go-to was this level of expectation for this person or this event or this experience. But now I have to adjust that. How, how hopeful can I be now going through that process? So, hoping that makes sense. But I, the first thing that comes to mind really is jumping into a leadership position and interviewing for different roles, when that was first happening. And you have to have a lot of perseverance through interviewing, because you're being very vulnerable. You're putting yourself out there and you want something so much. And what I've come to learn is, hope will lead you forward and you leave fear behind when you do put yourself out there and you move through that. Um, because you will have circumstances where you will feel that disappointment, right? Like maybe you didn't get the job, you didn't move past that screening, or maybe you went all the way through a process and got to the very end and you didn't get the job. I used to think, which one is worse? Which feeling of disappointment is worse? Um, so that's where hope for me came in, because it did take someone else, it did take hope for me to think about that someone else would see something in me that I couldn't see in myself, nor could others maybe see in me. So that's what comes to mind.
It actually echoes, and that's a perfect segue, Lauren, to the theme and the heart of your book, The Leader Inside, which I'm very fortunate that I do happen to have a copy here, and I know Megan, you made just a beautiful contribution to this book, and there are many authors who contributed to the book, but the leader inside, at least the ethos, to that, very much echoes this kind of active ignition of hope. And Megan and the other contributors to the book, and you as well, Lauren, talk about how by looking through by seeing the good in someone through this lens of hope, and seeing that there is a leader inside, that there is potential, that there are gifts, that are strengths. I mean, your book is very much, I find it to be very much a love letter to hope, and an acknowledgement, and a series of just all of these beautifully wrought thank yous of those who have seen things in you, and the contributors to the book who are acknowledging, hey, someone saw this leader inside of me. Uh,
Mhm.
so really much taking the lens of hope, and putting it through the lens of leader, and really, to me, the book is all just about what you just said, seeing something, the art of seeing someone, or something in someone that's good, and helping them bring it out.
Mm. I could have highlighted that entire book.
Mm.
Um,
I
but when
did.
you think about some of those love letters of hope, like what are the things, Lauren, that you are getting feedback on that people seem to be clinging to the most from that text, as far as all the beautiful messages that are resonating?
Well, first of all, I'd like to share that all of the contributors in the book really are so meaningful to me. They really mean a lot to me, both personally and professionally. And it wouldn't be the leader inside without their stories. So that's probably at the top of the list that people have said, wow, that's really cool that you spotlighted these voices and we got to know other voices through your book. And I'm now going to get Megan's book or Lainey's book, as a result of that. So that's pretty cool, to have people see what I see in the people who contributed. So that's the first thing that is really resonating with people. And then the other thing I would say is, wow, Lauren, people would say, thank you for showing your vulnerability. You really were very honest in this book, and I'll tell you, before I sent it out, for the final, it was kind of scary. And I'm sure both of you can relate, when you send that final version out. I started really getting nitpicky with words that I wasn't nitpicky with before. Like I was really reading line by line, and how will this land on people? And how will that word land? Let me change this. And I remember I had something like 48 word changes, throughout the book, because that was the intention, and my hope, talking about hope, is that I wanted to make people feel seen as they were reading the book, and I wanted to make sure everything was landing the way I had intended it to. So that was why, I did that. But I think that was just the next thing that came to mind, was that people just said, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing some of your challenges going, your journey in leadership, that it wasn't easy. Um, about all around mentorship, that's been a really strong piece too. I think people are really interested in mentorship. It seems to be a topic that lands on people well, because I think mentorship does provide hope to people when they hear that they have a mentor in their life. That gives people hope. So all of those things, I think. And it's still kind of new for me to
Mhm.
have somebody bring up the book. I mean, it doesn't happen like really often, but last week I was in a space where I went to a this event. It's called a coaching collaborative. that I'm a part of is part of where I am in the area that I work in. And it's a network of coaches, local instructional coaches and leaders who lead with a coaching mindset. And I had to leave a little bit early from the event to get back to work. And I see someone like running up to me. I thought they were running towards the door, actually, and they weren't. They were trying to get me before I left out of the door. And they said, Lauren, Lauren. And I turned around and I said, oh, yes, yes. I didn't know the person's name. I knew she looked familiar, but she said, I just thank you for writing that book. She says, I really, it's very inspiring, what you have done. And I walked out and I said, oh my goodness, that's right. I do have a book. You don't walk around. I'm sure, you guys feel, saying, oh, I have a book out there. It's not on my mind, every day. So that's pretty cool that my book actually gave somebody hope for the future. So
I think it's giving much more than somebody hope. And I know that Sean and I are among the many who've been deeply appreciative of your stories and vulnerability and your writing craft and your leadership. So I'm just glad you did write that book because it needed to be written and it is inspiring so many of us in our daily work.
Thank you. And happy to quote Sean in the book as well. And Meghan's quotes all over the book. It's like, I think I even took my quote from your book. And I was like, as I said, in Legacy of Learning, because I think that's how we're connected. We just, we have we have a similar mindset, but I think we also push each other's thinking too, which is so nice. I think any quotes I shared them because it pushed me to think a little bit differently. So I think that's kind of cool too about us.
Yeah. One of the things that is kind of our operating definition of hope in this podcast, comes from the great book by Casey Gwynn and Chan Hellman, Hope Rising, how the science of hope can change your life. And I'm very grateful Meghan, introduced this book to me, and Lauren, I want to read the definition of hope that we've kind of echoed, and I want to get your take on it through your lens as a leader and as an educator. Hope is the belief that your future can be brighter and better than your past, and that you actually have a role to play in making it better. So what are those kind of small moves that you do to kind of operate maybe within the guise of that of that operating definition for us? Hope.
Can I have you read it one more time so it could sink in a little bit
Yeah,
more?
absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Hope is the belief that your future can be brighter and better than your past, and that you actually have a role to play in making it better. And, as I read that definition and I'm looking at you, like, you live and breathe this, in many ways, as not just as an educator and director of literacy and school administrator and coach and mentor, but even, Meghan, it was you gave both Lauren and me such beautiful compliments as parents, and just seeing, how you love your sons, Lauren, and your family, and how you exemplify this for us. Probably why, Meghan, we immediately, like, yeah, Lauren's the first guest.
Aw. Making me blush over here. Well, you know what? Thank you for reading the definition again, because with definitions and quotes and things like that, it takes me a couple of times sometimes to process it so I can make a connection. Um, so I think there are many versions of ourselves and who we are. It's like who we were, who we are, and who we're continuously striving to be, right? And each version of ourself builds the bridge to our future, right? So picture a bunch of little small bridges, right? In every um, frame of your life, and I'm calling it a frame, right? Because you can look at your life in increments, whether it's 5 years, every 5 years, or every 10 years that you're living. Think about the evolution of you, who
Mm.
you were, who you are, who you're continuously striving to be. So I think hope lives within those bridges, right? Oh, as we walk over those bridges, we get to the next segment or frame of our life. And there's like this saying I saw on social media. It's something like this, and I might be totally not getting it right, but it was like, remember what you wanted, what you currently have.
Mm.
Have you seen that?
Yeah, something along those.
Something like that, right? Something along the lines. Remember when you wanted what
Yeah.
you currently have, right?
Hmm.
And then you get to a new place and it's like, what do I hope for now? Some people, um, it's interesting. I feel like I have a little bit of this personality in my adult life. I wouldn't say this is how I was years ago, but where I get to a place and then I'm looking for the next thing sometimes. I'm like, okay, this is awesome. And I live in it and I do appreciate it in the moment. But then it's like I'm striving for something else that I can be hopeful for. And sometimes I do have people who are close to me in my life that just say, well, Lauren, like, why aren't you you're good where you are, like just, enjoy it. Just enjoy it. I mean, that's something I'm still trying to work on is living in the moment, enjoying things, really soaking in the experience and not always striving for the next.
Hmm.
So sometimes we have to slow down as we want to manifest hope. We have to slow down while we're doing it.
Mm. That's so powerful. And Megan, I don't know about you, but I'm like, I'm manifesting a future blog post from Lauren. And
I love
you just
it.
essentially wrote a blog post right there. That is a rewindable moment. Wow. Wow.
I think you've also given us the definition of happiness. It's my definition of happiness comes from J.B. Yeats, but his quote that essentially happiness is growth, and we're happiest when we're growing. And so I think that is probably part of what you're describing too. That you see that you're continuing to grow and evolve, and that can be deeply fulfilling, and that can also be hope giving. And I think
Mm.
those two things definitely have an intersection and reciprocity between each other.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think happiness is the ultimate goal, right? Whatever that means for us. I think it means something a little bit different to different people, right? Um, I see some people who are happy doing things that I wouldn't think of, and vice versa. But I always admire that, where you can find your purpose in life, you know who you are, you know what you value, you know what you're striving for. And some people are okay just living in a space where they're not continuously striving, they're just being. And I think there's something okay about that too, you know.
What in what in education gives you hope? What are those things that are happening in education that kind of sustain and give you reminders for that there's hope in our noble profession?
The kids, first and foremost, when that's why we're here, is for the kids. We are responsible for shaping the future with our kids. They are the leaders of tomorrow in whatever they choose to lead in life, right? They're leaders for different reasons. And when I walk into schools, that's where the excitement is. That's when you step into the mess of learning, as I would say, and you see the hope inside the eyes of kids, through the eyes of kids, how excited they get when they learn something new, um, when they form a new friendship, when they have a new learning experience, or when I used to love seeing my kids when we would go on field trips when I was a teacher, because it was a time, or at recess or something, because it was a time where they weren't in an environment that was as structured. They were in a new context, and you can kind of see who they are, a different facet of them. So I think kids give me hope for the future because they are the future, right? But also the people we work with are, and that involves every single person who works in our educational ecosystem, and in the community that we're serving. They give me hope too because they're so supportive of what we want to do. I've never really met an educator or a community member that hasn't had the best interests of kids at heart. Sometimes we have different perspectives on things, right? But that's what makes the world go around, where it's okay to have different uh, perspectives. I think what gives me hope too is seeing people who listen, and for me being more patient in my listening in return, because I think listening is powerful. We don't always have to do the talking to make things happen. Sometimes it's okay to just sit back and take it all in. So that's what gives me hope.
It's beautiful. It also echoes to the one of my favorite passages in your book, eternal memories manifest hope for the future. And Meghan also does a similar move in Legacy of Learning, where you both give very just beautifully wrought love letters to an educator or a person in your life that manifested something beautiful in you, and that it's actually kind of a small move, for hope, if you will, to think back to that person, who had that impact, and to acknowledge it. For many of us as educators, whether we are in a psychologically unsafe situation, or we're not feeling fulfilled, or if we're dealing with imposter syndrome, you both of you write very beautifully in your respective books about a person, or a mentor or a coach or a leader that has kind of carried you through, even though they may not be with you, every day as they were years ago. And I just think that's such powerful advice and such a powerful reminder for educators as we're getting through the doldrums of the holidays. As we're recording this, it's October, and that there's a little bit of a slump in October for educators, right? And I just think that I just you know how I feel about that chapter, and you know how I feel.
Mhm.
I adore it.
Thank you. That was actually a blog post that I wrote years ago, very early on in my blogging. And it's interesting, the topic of this podcast is hope. And I remember when I wrote that title, Eternal Memories Manifest Hope for the Future, the reason why, and I left the title as is, and I elaborated on that post, obviously, and wrote back and forth with my fourth grade teacher. I got her to collaborate with me on that, which made it even more special. But who knew is that little fourth grade student, that 9, 10-year-old girl sitting in Mrs. Roth's class, that she was giving me hope for the future. She was modeling behaviors that I wanted to be. I wanted to be Mrs. Roth. So I think our actions are really powerful, and that through action, we can provide hope for people, and not even know it. It's like, why do things happen? We don't always see it right now. I think you said that before, Sean, but we eventually it comes together, hopefully comes together. And those moments are really beautiful when you can say, okay, That's why that happened. Now I get it. I didn't get what that interaction was about then, and it might have just been a microcosm of my day then, but now I get it.
Right on.
I think something I appreciate about both of you and your leadership, and this appears in both of your works as well, is the vulnerability to talk about, the struggles that come with leadership, or the struggles that might come with being a classroom teacher or a principal or a district level leader. And I recently had the pleasure of being in a learning session with Dr. John Hattie, and he was saying that he was playing school with his granddaughter, and he was the student and she was the teacher, and he made sure he sat down so that she could stand up, and so she was the one who holds the power, kind of like traditionally, like what kids might think of when they think of a teacher. And she was giving his assignment of sentences to write down, and he purposely made a mistake in the last sentence. And so she's checking his work, and she's like, good, yep, good job, gives him a check mark, gets to the third one where it was wrong, and she says, good job, great job. And he said, well, hang on a second, I got that last one wrong. And she said, but you tried. And what he was laughing about, though, was that she didn't know that he got the last one wrong, but she saw teachers as being the all-knowing. And so it was sort of a reminder that we need to also show people when we don't know. And you were talking earlier about listening, Lauren, and about hanging back. And you were even telling us a story before we pressed record about saying, I don't know yet. I'm still thinking about that. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's something that can be hope giving to other people, so they don't think that people who lead or teach, that only shiny, perfect people do those things. Only people who get those things right the first time or have the answers do those things. No learners do those things. And we're constantly modeling what it looks like to not know, and how we respond when we don't know.
Yeah, I think that does give people hope. I think sometimes unintentionally too. I don't know if we intend for that when we're in that state of, oh, I'm still thinking about it, or I don't have the answer, right? Like, I don't know if that's the intention, but I do know that I think it could give people hope that when they look at a leader who's imperfect, right, that they can be imperfect too,
Yeah, there is that notion, it's progress, right? And not perfection. And if you see that other person stumbling and struggling, I think again that underscores a lot of our work, in terms of modeling vulnerability and it's almost like, man, that person tripped, and that gives me hope that I'm not alone in all of this, right? Or I'm struggle is not solitary.
right? Exactly. Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, I think you too give hope to all the educators out there through your content and your work. And I know we were sitting here just talking about mine because I'm a guest, but I really do want to illuminate that both of your work um, has really impacted me and has given me hope um, to manifest for the future. Whether, Sean, it's your podcast or your blogging, or you sending me an article that really resonated with me. Those little gestures within that content, or those things that you're doing give me hope. And then Meghan, I was thinking about everybody in my building has a firefly jar because of you. So like that's the impact we can have from Meghan's blog post about the fire. Let's be fireflies, right? Like that's one that, I mean, I love all your posts, but that one really stayed with me.
Agreed.
And to the point where you can have that impact. And now you can walk around my district office and walk in and see a firefly jar, a little mason jar with lights in it that I've given to people for gifts. Nice. So you really do know how to spread hope, both of you. And not only am I appreciative, but I know many people, many educators and humans are very grateful for what you put out there.
Well, you both are such great models of what leadership should be, which is um, really helping other people see their potential and their impact, and always giving it back to the people around you. And I really work hard to model that myself, but it's because the two of you do that so beautifully for people like me.
Thank you.
Thank
That
you.
means a lot.
It is important too, and I think the three of us, although we've not been in the same physical space, I think it's important within, for the educators who are listening and tuning in is to find your people. And when you do find your people, hang on and with both hands and invest. And so I'm very fortunate that I found my people here.
Mhm.
And I just value our friendship. And that's important as educators is it can be a very solitary, lonely trajectory, and it can be a gig that can be ponderous, but it is important that we find ways to fill our own buckets with the people whom we surround ourselves with. So part of that is having that friendship that is filled with hope, and that gives you hope, and that gives you the energy and the momentum to carry on, and to feel empowered. So I think all of us in our own way in this episode are in our own way kind of exemplifying and modeling that friendship too is another vehicle for hope. Camaraderie, kinship is another way to kind of ignite hope for others. And so I'm very grateful that I'm surrounded with two just wonderful people that give me hope and inspire me for hope. So I would encourage those who are listening and watching, and if you don't, and if you're listening to us going, I don't know who my people are. Well, you know what? The three of us can be your people, and we can be here for you. So you're not alone, and you definitely give the world hope.
Well, I think you actually define collective hope, Sean, because individual hope is powerful, but collective hope is even more powerful. And the research shows it. And that might be why Gallup did research, which led to the Q12 survey. And it's a workplace satisfaction survey, essentially, for attracting, retaining great staff. And one of the questions is, do you, or you rate it from 1 to 5. So the statement is, I have a best friend at work. And I think it's easy to underestimate how essential that is for our staff and for us as people. And so if you are someone out there who's struggling to find your people in your daily work community, it's important to find them anywhere, and they're all over. And I think that's the beauty of social media. Sometimes it gets a bad rep, right? Because it's people's highlight reels. Sometimes it makes us feel like we're not doing enough, or like, why can't I do this as well as this person? But if you dig a little deeper, you can actually find really meaningful connection that can fuel your work and your hope and your collective hope for the future.
It's beautiful.
Lauren, before we let you go, and we know that you've got a rather large Costco trip and
Sure do.
Saturday afternoon, and I don't know. Hopefully, there's hope involved in that trip. Um, with
Nutella.
Nutella.
Yes, there you go.
But what are the best ways? Because we Megan and I benefit from just all of your great content and follow you on social media. But what are the best ways for those who are listening, for folks to connect with you and to learn with you?
Sure. Thank you for asking. Well, I would say you can go to my website, laurenmkaufman.com. You can find my writing on there, or anything that I do professionally there. And Lauren M. Kaufman, that's my handle on X and Instagram. So you can find me there as well.
Wonderful. And we'll be sure to put all of those items in the show notes, in addition to a link to just the wonderful book by Lauren, The Leader Inside: Stories of Mentorship to Inspire the Leader Within, came out this year. And many of our mutual friends that give us hope have contributed to this book. One of them being my wonderful co-host and bandmate and good friend in hope, Meghan Lawson. So please be sure to just pick this book up. This is a great book for book studies, and just a great book. Just if you need just kind of some everyday examples of hope and action. The Leader Inside is definitely a must read. So cannot recommend this book enough. This beautiful book, which long time in coming, and what a gift for our world.
Thank you so much. That means the world. Thank you.
Thank you for spending time with us today, Lauren. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
You bet. This gave me a lot of hope. Hope will lead us forward.
Right on. What a great note to end on. And again, thank you all for tuning into this episode. Our first guest is Lauren M. Kaufman, and we are very grateful to have Lauren here with us. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for amplifying hope. This is Sean Gaillard with Meghan Lawson. Hope amplified on.